To go to Ottawa right now, in fact, where, of course, the Speaker of the House, Anthony Rota, found himself in some hot water over the praise, really, of a Nazi veteran who was there during the Zelensky visit over the weekend. Let's listen live. This is Andrew Scheer, the former leader of the Conservatives.
Every aspect of President Zelensky's visit would have been highly managed by the PMO. There are obviously incredible security concerns when you have not just a head of state, not just a head of a foreign dignitary, but someone whose people are fighting for their lives and their survival, someone who is targeted by Vladimir Putin's regime. Obviously, there are massive security implications. Your statement doesn't answer the questions around how this individual was vetted, how the government, who would have seen all aspects, all guest lists, all interactions with President Zelensky, allowed that person to be in the chamber. Members of Parliament don't have the ability to vet who might happen to be in the chamber on any given day. That's the responsibility of the Director of Protective Services, who reports to the Minister of Public Safety. And the coordination between the Prime Minister's office, the protocol office here in the House of Commons, and that protective service is what members trust is happening to make sure that things like that don't happen. If someone of that background, which a straightforward Google search will show served in that particular division during World War II, if that basic level of vetting was not done by the government, that raises serious concerns. What kind of message does that send to our allies around the world? That when they come to the House of Commons to address the House and Senate, that basic rudimentary vetting as to who might be in the galleries isn't done? That's incredible, Mr. Speaker. So we'll take your statement under advisement. We'll have more to say on this, but there are still many, many questions that need to be answered as to how the Prime Minister's office so completely dropped the ball on this.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would just like to respond to my honourable colleague, because I think we both share the frustration about what happened on Friday, but I do want to reiterate, and as you have made very clear in your statement, Mr. Speaker, that this was your initiative. The Government of Canada had no knowledge of this individual coming to, the government had no knowledge. The Speaker is responsible for this chamber. He invited him of his own accord, and he made the decision himself to recognize him. Neither the Government of Canada nor the delegation of Ukraine had any knowledge of this. I would respectfully submit, Mr. Speaker, that you clarify this for the members opposite, because it's important that this information be clear and that these false allegations do not continue, because they're not true. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That's right. Nous allons aller avec l'honorable.
We'll proceed to the honourable member for La Prairie and then come back to the member for Regina Capel. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, today, before I talk about the situation before us, I'd like to say that I have thoughts for people who suffered in World War II. It was one of the darkest moments in history, particularly for the Jewish community, who experienced full-on the aggression of a pitiless invader. Mr. Speaker, you know how much I've always found your work to be outstanding, and I've always taken the trouble of saying so. So I'm a bit emotional about this. You've always been a strength in our view. We've never doubted anything you proposed or anything you did. So much so that on Friday, when you suggested that we applaud an individual who, it turns out, was with the Nazis, we never would have thought that it was anything but a deserving person, a person deserving of the House's ovation. And then subsequently, we learned that that was not so. This was someone with a very dark past, and that was a shock. It came as a shock to us because you were, in a way, responsible for that commendation. That said, you apologized, and I'm completely convinced that that was a sincere apology. And it's your conscience, your wisdom, and it's not for me to say whether those apologies were sufficient. I'd like to go beyond partisanship here. I think this situation calls on us to be better than that. This was a situation where the Ukrainian leader, who may feel affected by the situation. So when you think in Quebec and in Canada, there are people that are standing in solidarity with Ukraine and the Ukrainian leader. Well, let's just say that that situation was not what we would have hoped for. The Ukrainian leader is a hero, and unfortunately, he is somehow tarnished by what happened on Friday. Thank you.
I believe the honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As chair of the Canada-Slovakia Parliamentary Friendship Group, it's my obligation to point out that the individual in question who was recognized on Friday was part of the division that was used against the Slovak National Uprising, which was a military uprising organized by Slovak resistance movements during World War II, comprised of the anti-Nazi political faction of the Slovak nation, which is my heritage. Units of this division this man fought with were sent to help squash the Slovak rebellion. Battle groups were formed to actively search out and destroy members of the resistance. And according to Slovak historian Kay Fremol, the division's members were helping in anti-partisan, repressive, and terrorist actions and committed murders and other excesses. Based on what I've heard in the House today, I feel like this is the government trying to collectivize responsibility for an incident that was solely within their purview. By inviting the Ukrainian president to our country, we had a duty to protect him in all aspects. And by the government failing to have either a non-existent or judgment-free vetting process for members who would be recognized and lauded in the House of Commons, the House of Commons should be not accepting collective responsibility for that abject, egregious lack of judgment that has tarnished the reputation of our country and led to people like the ambassador from Poland demanding an apology from us. This is a time in which our country needs to be having, our allies need to be standing with us. There should be no question about whether or not we have our act together, and yet here we are having this debate. It's beyond an embarrassment. It is a stain on our country. And I refuse, as a member of this place who represents 120,000 Canadians, to collectively share responsibility with a government that has a pattern of not vetting questionable individuals that they take meetings with. Jaswal Atwal, Joshua Boyle. Enough. I will not, on behalf of my constituents, take 1 ounce of blame for this government failing a vetting process. They can say, Mr. Speaker, it was your purview. They invited this man. They invited this world global leader here, and they failed to vet this. So no, on behalf of the constituents of Calgary-Nose Hill, I will not accept collective responsibility, and the buck stops at the Prime Minister's office.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader, then the Government House Leader. Before anything starts, I just want to make it clear that it was my decision, and my decision alone. This was a constituent who wanted to see wanted to be here, and I recognized him. It was my decision, and I apologize profusely. I cannot tell you how regretful it is, and it may not be good enough for some of you, and for that I apologize. And I'll let the Honourable Opposition House Leader take it from here, and then we'll go to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to underscore the point that my colleague just raised. This is a question about, is it the government's position that when we have a foreign head of state, that the government does zero security vetting for who will be in the same room as that head of state. Is that the message that we're sending to our allies, that when they come here, you don't know who's going to be in the gallery? I mean, what kind of message does that send to Canada's partners and allies around the world? And that's the point that we're raising, Mr. Speaker. It's all well and good for you to come in and accept your share of the responsibility. But there's only one entity in this chamber that has the resources and the mandate to keep people safe. As my colleague just pointed out, when President Zelensky comes here on the invitation of the Prime Minister, when the entire itinerary is planned by the PMO, the government of Canada has an obligation to him personally to secure his safety, has a responsibility to the people of Ukraine to ensure the safety of their president. And he has a responsibility to all Canadians to uphold the dignity of Canada as a country, as a trusted partner and ally. And in all three of those areas, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister failed. Yes. Failed to do that basic level of responsibility. That's the point that we're underscoring, Mr. Speaker. There was a Nazi in the chamber. There's only one entity, one group that could have done anything about it, that could have flagged that. And as I mentioned, the director of the Parliamentary Protective Service reports up to the Government of Canada for operational matters. That is in the mandate of the Protective Services. The director of the Parliamentary Protective Service must be a member of the RCMP. That's in the enabling legislation. That was all done for a reason, Mr. Speaker. Yes. I was in the chair when that legislation was passed, and it was precisely because the House of Commons itself did not have the capability to do full security vettings and background checks on individuals. That was the reason why we did that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
To make available to the House of Commons the resources of federal institutions like the RCMP and like CSIS. That is why we do not accept the attempt to collectivize blame for this. Opposition parties do not have access to CSIS reports. We do not have access to the RCMP's vast capabilities to do background checks and vetting. And in this case, it would have taken a simple Google search to find a blog post written by that individual saying that he served in an SS division, in a Nazi division during World War II. And again, all those resources.
All right, so the Speaker of the House in Ottawa at the House of Commons, Anthony Rota, has apologized for inviting what he described as a constituent, a decision he says he made alone to bring a Nazi into the event on Friday night, a former Nazi soldier, during the visit by Ukrainian President Zelensky. As you can hear there, all of the opposition members are appalled by this, questioning the government, questioning the vetting process, questioning what this has done to Canada. Michelle Rumpel-Garner saying this was a stain on our country. Much more to come out of Ottawa today on that situation as well.